multiple years, and I'm currently vice chair. I feel like a complete fraud. I know so little about AI. I've learnt so much from the preceding sessions, but I do know a little bit about the Caldicott principles. And on several occasions recently, I've been challenged by people saying, do you think the Caldicott principles are still valid for AI? Are they going to need to be changed for AI? So I've put a little bit of time into thinking that through, and here are my own reflections. They're not reflections of council, they're my own reflections, and also questions relating to the principles that I think you may wish to ask when you're considering the vignettes when we move into breakout groups later this afternoon. So, first of all, the Caldicott principles, what are they? They're not the law. They are a guide. They were given us by the National Data Guardian, which is a statutory role, so they must be given due regard, but they are a guide. And it's about the use of confidential information. They are not Caldicott principles about the use of AI. It's around the use of Caldicott confidential information. And we must bear in mind that that might be patient or service users, or it might even be staff information. They're intended for individual care and for other purposes, in health and in social care, but also in organisations that we share information with. And for me, they add value. They help maintain trustworthiness. They promote the lawful, ethical, and appropriate use of confidential information. If you've heard me speak about the origin of the Caldicott principles, you will know that I like to compare them to a good bottle of Scottish whisky. And they were initially distilled way back in 1997 when there were just 6 of them from the report on the review of patient identifiable information by Dame Fiona. Now, I think successful maturation, they require nurture along the way, and indeed that's what they've had. So that the Caldicott principles look a little different now to when they first came out of the still. In 2013, we needed to check for any poisonous elements like methanol. And in actual fact, we were given Principle 7 because we recognised that it was as important to share information as it can be to maintain confidentiality in some scenarios. And that is still very valid and needs to be taken into account with AI. By 2020, by popular demand, there was a new bottling. The National Data Guardian went out for consultation to the public, and the public very clearly said that they wanted no surprises. They wanted to know and understand. They wanted transparency, and we've heard about this already this afternoon. But Principle 8 was the result of that particular popular demand. And now we're in 2025. There's these complex notes starting to develop in the flavour. And so I think we just do need to take perhaps a little bit of a taste test, and perhaps collectively we might think that through. Now, I'm going to present the principles, but bear in mind that they sit within the Caldicott framework. So all the time we're thinking about trust, logic, authenticity, empathy, and our ethical framework, which is the biomedical ethics framework, encompassing autonomy, beneficence, non-malevolence, and distributive justice. And I like to think of the principles as being the filling of the sandwich of the other 2 elements. So Principle 1, briefly, justify the purpose for data use. It's for data use. So it's for data use for AI. So there'll always be a little bit of an element of, well, can you justify the AI use first, and then the data that is being used? Or is there another way of achieving this aim, the goal of the project? Can it be achieved a different way? It requires a really clear definition of purpose and scope. It's different whether is it going to be different whether or not you're using AI or whether you're developing AI, or in some scenarios, as Jeff mentioned, it might be both. A lot of the detail will be fleshed out, hopefully, within a data protection impact assessment. Have you built your Caldicott principles into the data protection impact assessment? Because over time, that means that as you review your DPIA, the justification will be reviewed at the same time. Um, Enormous data sets, the impact of those, how big, we heard Claire talk about that, and anonymization, and also bias and whole system approaches. And that's where the element of distributive justice might come in there. Are we capturing everybody? Do we have equality? Or are we resorting to, well, actually, this process will work for 80% of the people and not for everybody? Uh, Using confidential information only when it's necessary. So can we anonymize it? And if we do anonymize it, is that a process in its own right? What's our legal basis there? And who is deciding what's reasonably necessary? You heard Claire describe how they have patients on their governance and there's a consultation exercise. This perhaps should be co-designed. Is it the clinician, or are we being driven by system providers who are telling us what's necessary? And is it informed, or is there that black box because we don't know what's happening within the AI? Who's going to do that checking? And again, if all this falls apart and we have business continuity planning, does that need something different? Does it need a different type of information being supplied? So we need to think about the business continuity plan, perhaps separate from the original project. And there is here definitely an element of, well, you need to trust me on this. And who are we trusting? Are we trusting system providers? Are we trusting organizations? All questions that I think could be considered. Principle 3, using the minimum necessary confidential information. It's not the minimum, it's the minimum necessary. And you need to bear in mind that might be the full data set. We don't know, and sometimes we cannot know what the person who is requesting the data needs. Because we may not understand their roles well enough. So understanding each other's roles is really important. So for example, the obvious example would be for safeguarding. How do we know what somebody who is in a different organisation to ourselves actually needs to know? And is the answer always the same? And if we do give additional superfluous information, then we know there's that additional risk of breach and over-processing, but will it also cause unwanted error and bias in the AI system? Principle 4, access should be on a need-to-know basis. And again, we're coming into privacy by design here. Can we build this in so that it's poka-yoke from the beginning? And not just about on a need-to-know basis, but a need-to-know at any point in time. So do we need to build systems that give us just-in-time information? I've put some systems on this slide that can help. Again, the data protection impact assessment is there as a really important tool that the Caldicott Guardian may have input into. And again, audit and access alerts, absolutely very important. And if we worry about staff accessing data unnecessarily, as has been highlighted in the recent consultation exercise, then how do we know if our machines, our AI, are also accessing data that we didn't expect? Principle 5, everyone with access is aware of their responsibilities. And I think this goes beyond training, but it goes to education. And not just education in the systems that are there and how the information is being used, but how to talk to others. We know we're going to need consent, explicit consent for some elements, and we know the need to be transparent. But how do frontline staff have those conversations in an efficient but effective way to tell people what's happening with their data and also potentially to seek their consent? Um, uh, the idea of human oversight. Are people aware of their responsibilities as the human in the loop and their responsibility for what has been written, for example, with AVTs? And again, I've put business continuity planning on this and who to escalate to if concerned or they've got questions. Principle 6 is comply with the law. There are no new laws at the moment in terms of data protection affecting AI, but there may be upcoming changes. So, for example, to Section 251, and will common law evolve over time so that there become new torts that we will need to watch out for AI, and we need to keep ourselves up to date from that perspective. And also thinking about it, if AI is that mystery black box and we don't know quite what it's doing, how do we comply with the current law's requirements, for example, for transparency, to inform patients about what we're doing with their information? Principle 7, there's a duty to share and to protect. So the duty to share can be just as important as the duty to protect. And I think we need to be really careful that AI doesn't limit us sharing or access in any way. And also that so by cutting down, by summarizing, by changing data, is it changing our ability to access what we could previously access? And considering the whole data life cycle from raw data right through to end product, I think it's really important to consider what the results of any AI processing might produce. And finally, principle 8, the no surprise principle. People should know what's happening with their information. Well, this takes time and resource, we know that. And currently, consultations are so short. But do you know what? AI is allowing more time to talk to patients in some scenarios. It is releasing resource. And perhaps some of the resource that's released should be used for this transparency. And therefore, when you're measuring the potential benefits of a project, perhaps you need to take that into account and knock it off from the overall totals at the end. We need to think about whether people can opt in and opt out. And perhaps while it's new technology and it's pilots and we're trying things out, we might want to allow people to opt in and out. But as time moves on, we may decide that this is business as usual. Similarly, I mean, I've no idea how a CT scanner works, um, but would I maybe be expected to understand how AI works alongside a CT scanner? Oh gosh, there's an incredible level of detail there to understand. And what is it that we should expect reasonably to be explaining to our data subjects, service users? And I think also worth just reflecting here the current significant organisational restructures, change, flux that is happening, and trying to ensure that we've got that transparency through that journey. It feels like we're going through two major journeys at the same time, and there's the potential that one might take us off the tracks, derail us. So my overall thoughts with AI is a tool and it has a flow of data. And in the same way as I wouldn't, as a Caldicott Guardian, advise about what brand of stethoscope to buy or what brand of x-ray equipment to buy, I might be able to advise about what happens with the information from those tools or putting into those tools. So for me, it's about targeting my Caldicott knowledge on the important stuff around the confidential information and not getting too panicked, as it were, by the thought of this huge new technology wave that's coming. Um, we talk about Caldicott guardians acting with wisdom, using their wisdom in the decisions and the advice that they offer. And I think with regards AI, that wisdom is probably a new chapter that we will need to develop. But that doesn't mean we're not able to apply our previous wisdom that we've gained over time. And some of that wisdom, for me, I have a framework for problem solving. You may have seen this before. I apologize if you have, but this is my framework for problem solving. And the very first part of this, the very first picture says, when I recognize a Caldicott problem, I need to focus on that Caldicott problem, make sure I'm in the right mindset and that I'm putting one foot firmly in front of the other whilst wearing the right shoes, the right protective equipment, and try not to get derailed, distracted, fall off my tightrope that I'm walking. So really focus on the task in hand. Having said that, we have other tools there to support us. I've mentioned already about a DPIA. I want to flag that a DPIA is a process, it's not a one-off thing. And it has lots of different elements within it. And key ones are your DPIA has so much documentation in it about your decision making. You will still need your Caldicott log, but the DPIA will help you with all of those if you have built the Caldicott principles through it. And also, it being a process, it requires regular review, which is going to be so important in this fast-moving sphere. And my other thought was, if we are to be lawful, ethical, and appropriate, it's team sport. We know that already. George often refers to applying the Caldicott principles as being a team sport. But if I think back to Data Security Standard 1, that little blue lozenge you see there was a suggested governance diagram showing lines of accountability from Data Security Standard 1 on the toolkit, Data Security and Protection Toolkit, some time ago. But I think if we were to redraw that with AI and the implications of AI, as Claire highlighted, it needs to be a collaboration with so many other people to create a new stakeholder map. So if as a Caldicott Guardian you've drawn your stakeholder map, you may wish to reconsider what you have put on there and also think about the comms that follow along from that stakeholder map. And that's me. I'm finished. And it says break until 1400, but it's now 1417.